welcome to your favorite Indian television show. Of course, it's Aussie Indian. Thanks for your company. Hope you have been enjoying all the local community news, the news from India as well as Bollywood gossip and Indian fashion we bring on our show. Thanks to our media partner, we are able to bring all these fantastic video clips from India. Well, in this show, we are talking about a very serious issue. It's called the human trafficking. If you think that the slave trading has ended in this world, think again. It is still happening in some of the developing countries, including India, and one brave woman called Anita Kanaiya has taken this head on. And she has started a project called Freedom India Project, and she is the founder director. And we are going to bring you an exclusive interview with Anita. And in segment 3, as we usually do, we bring you some colorful and glamorous Indian fashion. Now let's get straight into the show. As I mentioned before, human trafficking is still a very big problem around the world, including India. Many of these criminals who are engaging in this kind of activity are still going ahead with their business as usual. And one woman, Anita Kanaiya, has taken this issue head on, and she has started a project called Freedom Project India to expose these criminals. And Anita agreed to talk to a staff reporter, Ursula Melham. Let's take a look at part 1 of that interview with Anita.
And today I am joined by the incredible founder and director of the Freedom Project India. It's Anita Kanaiya. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and meet with us on Aussie Indian.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So Anita has flown all the way from India to come and talk about the works, about the projects and the good work that it does, as well as share some insight as to how we can all get involved into impacting the lives of young women and children in India. And now, can you please talk to us about what the general issue and what is the core of human trafficking?
So human trafficking is, as the word signifies, the sale of human beings, which is incredible to think of in this day and age where we believe that slavery has been abolished, but it's reinvented itself in the form of human trafficking. And India is one of the source and destination countries which ranks among the top 3 for people being trafficked to and from. When we say human trafficking, it's difficult to understand when you haven't really seen it, but it's women and children mostly who are vulnerable to this and who have been sold into this. And the conditions, deplorable conditions, whether it's being sold for labor or whether it's being sold for commercial sex, they are cooped up in places. I've seen a girl who was put in a dog cage and just kept there to break her will so that they could abuse her, and she was only about 11. So if it's that, or if it's factories where children have been kind of herded into and they work 14 hours, they sleep there, they work there, so really deplorable conditions, something they never agreed for and have been forced into or coerced into. That's really what human trafficking is.
Okay. And Anita, as a loud and active voice for the poor and the oppressed women and children of India, what is the biggest issue right now? I know that the Freedom Project is a not-for-profit organisation to end slavery and empower communities. What is the number 1 priority for you right now?
Well, I think, there are a few priorities, but to end slavery, it really will require all of us working together, considering the fact that human trafficking is, I think in India, the number 1 social issue. The ease with which human beings are bought and sold, and the apathy that exists simply because it still doesn't concern me. It's still out there. A lot of people still believe it's very rural based, and it's involving more illiterate people than literate. But the truth and the reality is that it's crawled in to our backyards. And if we don't do something about it, raising an awareness, that's why I'm here, and that's why we're doing this talk, is really to create that awareness that we need to talk about it. We need the word out there. We need to be able to convey that message to people in vulnerable situations. What are they looking out for? What should they be careful about? And so I think that's our number one priority, is to put the message out there and to prevent it. Because we do rescues and we do rehabilitate victims and survivors of trafficking,
Yeah.
but that makes it so difficult to work with them because of the trauma that they've endured during
Yeah.
that time. So if we can build the next generation, the youth, to really do something about this, spread the awareness, social media, hold even home events to be able to create that awareness among friends and colleagues in workspaces,
Yeah.
to talk about it.
Yeah, well,
It's
there's-
going to make a change.
Yeah, definitely no excuses in this day and age. And it all started for you one night 14 years ago. Can you tell our viewers about that night?
Yeah, so about the time that you're talking about, I had just had my first baby girl, and she was, I think, about 2 years old. And I had a phone call this night, and it was late in the night. I was in Bangalore, India, and I had this call from a friend who was working in this line, a lawyer, and he called and said there are these two girls who have managed to escape from their trafficker and are hiding in a public phone booth in the bus stand, Bangalore bus stand. Please can you go and just pick them up and bring them home, and somebody else will come and collect them. I wasn't going to do that simply because 10 o'clock at night, and anyone who knows India or Bangalore will realize, that's not a place you want to go to.
Yeah.
And 14 years back, it was worse than it is today. But he said he'll call back in 15 minutes. And we didn't have mobile phones then.
Yeah.
So it was a landline, and 15 minutes later he called and he said, in these 15 minutes I've tried other people, but there isn't anyone who is willing to go. So will you please do it? And even though, good sense told me not to do it, I ended up going that night. And we went to the bus stand and we managed to find these girls. They had hidden behind the telephone booth. And we picked them up and I brought them home. And I was never the same. They were 11 and 12 years old, and I heard their stories. I saw firsthand what had happened. I heard them describe the pain and the trauma of the places that they were held in, and I saw marks. One of the girls had a mark across her back. She was beaten with a steel chain and locked up in a dog cage, and I just couldn't stay quiet about it anymore.
Wow. And since then, you and your team have done tireless work, and you guys have performed countless of rescue missions. More than 400 is the number of rescue missions that you and your team have performed to help rescue these young women and children. Could you speak to some of those rescue missions and what are the associated risks?
Yeah. So when we talk about a rescue, for those who really don't know what happens, most times we have to build the entire investigation around the case, because the police in India have a lot of priorities for other things, like law and order is a problem, terrorism is a problem. So human trafficking kind of takes a back seat on this, but because we are so concerned about these the vulnerabilities of the women and children especially, and the fact that the longer they stay in these places, the more difficult it is for us to rehabilitate them, we have built a team of investigators who double up as clients, who will go in as sometimes pose as pimps, just to be able to get the information. They're undercover. But that's the only way we can get the information. Where are these women and children being held? How are they being brought? How do we infiltrate this place? What are the escape routes if we're going in? So we map the entire place. And now with technology, we geotag and, we have all of that information ready before we go to the police with this.
And you recently, so you obviously have done a lot of work with child beggary, but you also recently co-authored a book on this issue. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I co-authored the book with one of the top police officers at that time, with a government official who was the chairperson of the Child Welfare Committee, and with a lawyer. So myself and 3 others, we co-authored the only book on children begging, forced to beg, and its relationship to trafficking,
Yeah.
which hadn't been looked at before, because you take it for granted that when the children are very young and you see them with an adult, you believe that that adult and that child are related.
Yeah.
But the book was the result of a operation that we did in the city of Bangalore in 2011 in December, and we rescued 300 children who were aged under 10. 300 children. It was on national news. It was on CNN, IBN Breakfast News, and if I may share a really moving story
Please.
from that. So there was because it was on Breakfast News, there was a father who turned up from West Bengal, and he had seen this on news, and he had been told by family members that there are 300 children who've been found, maybe you'll find your son. And so he got a train and he came to Bangalore looking for his son who had gone missing 4 years ago. And the child was playing outside the house in West Bengal and was just picked up and taken away. So in the hope that he'll find his son, he came all the way to Bangalore. I met him and we sat down with him, and we had, before the operation began, 3 months before that, we had photographed every single child on the street. So when I said we, it was a partnership operation done with non-government organizations, with the police, with the Department of Women and Child Welfare in the state of Karnataka, in the city of Bangalore. And so we had all this documentation available. So we personally sat down and went through all of those 1,000 photographs with him. And sadly, he came with a picture, a small picture of his son when he was 2.5 years old. So he didn't even have a current picture of his kid. And that's the story of most people in the villages. You don't have identification documents. It's gotten better now, but this is talking about 2011. And so he had this picture, and the police were able to age the photograph, and they matched it with one of the pictures that we had taken. And I remember this because I was there when that picture was taken. So that there was a child who was beating a drum, quite a common sight in India, where you perform tricks on the road and then you beg for money after that. So there was a girl who was beating a drum, and then there was this little boy who had a school uniform on, but he was obviously not in school, must have been donated, given away as a second-hand piece of clothing. But that was how the photograph was. Heartbreaking as it was, we don't always have success stories in this.
And I can completely imagine that, and it would be heartbreaking, but you do the best that you do. And as well, I understand that you work in outreach, in identifying women who are or who could be victims of the sex trade. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I can't even begin to imagine that would be a very sensitive issue. It would be very, hard to work with. How do you deal with that?
Well, to understand that, you've got to understand a little bit about the Indian culture and how, it's quite sexually repressed. So there isn't overt, show of affection. Women dress quite modestly. Things have changed now with the younger generation. But, the reason that women and children are so vulnerable to this is because somehow the girl child, because of gender discrimination, has always learned to take authority from the male. So whether it's your father, whether it's your brother, whether it's your husband, you tend to respect, and so therefore the abuse of that power. When the man does the trafficking, it's difficult for them to come out of it.
And you've spoken briefly about the work that's been done in the state of Karnataka, as well as India more generally. How can our viewers, or what can we tell our viewers about different ways to get involved? What can they do to make an impact in bettering the lives of these young and oppressed people in India?
So I have mentioned a little bit about our work in Karnataka, but what I would like to say is that many of the women that we have rescued, that we have in our home, are not from the state of Karnataka.
Okay.
Like I said, they
Yes.
always traffic from another place.
course, yeah.
And the options to go back home aren't there.
Yeah.
One of it is the shame. The other is the fact that a lot of times family members or community people have been involved
Yeah.
in them being sold. So they don't want to go back, which means that then we have to create a family or an atmosphere of a community around them,
Okay.
so they can feel whole again, they can go back to being on their feet in sustainable employment. So one of the ways that we would love for people to be involved, and where you can be involved, is really to support the work financially. You could volunteer. If you do come down to India, or even in Australia, the Freedom Project does have an office, and you can be part of volunteering with them. You can, in any way, come down and do some training with us. We have started a social enterprise which is called the Heart of Baking,
Okay.
which is a baking initiative for these women. We've set up a women's cooperative, and we've taught them baking, and now they are making fruit-based mini cupcakes, bread rolls, and we're marketing that with schools
Oh,
and colleges.
great.
So that's their way of partnering with us
Yeah.
in providing employment opportunities for these women.
Okay.
So if you know baking and would love to come down and take a class or two, that's an opportunity as well.
Okay.
You could hold freedom evenings and talk about this issue,
Yeah.
because it's not just based in India. Human trafficking is a global concern, and if you would love to host a freedom evening, we've got that we can hand out. You can just have a discussion. You could raise some support for that, and just be empowered and aware, because the more aware we are, the more the information gets spread, the more likely we are to notice a victim of trafficking or to be involved in supporting the work.
Okay. And as well as that, what work does the Freedom Project India, back to the project specifically, what work do they do with government agencies in India? Just looking at it on a very broad scale, are there any initiatives to really push this forward?
Yeah, so all of the work that we do is in partnership with government agencies, because without law enforcement we can't do a rescue operation.
Of
Without
course.
without a
Yeah.
license to run a home, which is a government license, we can't
Yeah.
run a safe house. So we do partner with the government. We work quite closely with them, both for rescue operations as well as for rehabilitation of survivors.
Okay.
I myself am on a state high-powered committee to address human trafficking in the state of Karnataka. I do a lot of training with law enforcement,
Okay.
because many of them have not really seen the inside
Yes.
of these brothels. So we do police training, we train with government officials as well, and I am currently doing a social audit for the government on the state of the homes.
Great.
And how we can improve them.
Great work. Great. Well, thank you so much, Anita, for coming to speak with us about this very important.
Hope you got an idea of the seriousness of the problem of human trafficking in India. And hats off to this lady, Anita Kanaiya, who has done a fantastic job in starting this project. If you can help in any way, please do so. All the details are at the bottom of the screen, and jump